City Sounds. Creating podcasts, creating podcasters.
Hello, and welcome to the pilot series. I'm Elly Young, and this is Collector's Notes. In this podcast, we dive into the different worlds music collectors of every genre have built around them, as well as talk to experts within those genres. We really want to see where these passions lie and how they come about. This first episode is all about David, my favorite opera fanatic, who collects CDs of his favorite compositions and singers. I hope you enjoy listening. It's September 2022, and I'm moving into my flat when I meet one of my new neighbors, David Morris. He's very welcoming and insanely funny. What's more, I discovered David is a superfan. He goes to the opera once a week. That's thousands of shows within his 72 years. He's been collecting opera recordings for over 50 years, and he's honestly lost count of the number of works in his possession, which I'm estimating to be many thousands of pieces. His collection amazes me, and knowing what an absolute scream he is, I need to share his story. I'm curious about this hobby of his, as I'm sure he's not the only person in the world with such an extensive music collection. What drives this passion for opera? Are there others like him for other kinds of music? I'm Elly Young, a curious music fan, and I'm going to answer all of these questions and more in Collector's Notes, a podcast about music collectors. And it's only right to start by talking to the inspiration of the series, David, surrounded by his beloved collection.
Welcome to Opera House.
Hello!
Hello. My name is David Morris. I have been living here in this flat for over 40 years. Within my flat, as you probably can see, is my passion for music, opera, and I've got a very big collection of all composers, but of course I specialise in my favourite are Italian composers of the 18th and 19th century. Verdi, Donizetti, Bellini, Rossini, those would be the ones that I prefer.
As David opens the door, the first thing you see is the backdrop behind him. Wall to wall, floor to ceiling, it's stacked with shelves of opera CDs. And there's a display, almost like a shop, of box sets of all of the greatest singers: Pavarotti, Carreras, Leontyne Price, Marilyn Horne. Further down the hallway, the shiny jewel cases transition to a glossy red, the spines of hundreds of programs, each from an opera he's attended.
The great things about Rossini and Verdi and Donizetti and Bellini, those are the four, is they're all more or less from the same era, but the vocal writing, the structure is completely different. It's quite unique. In Donizetti in particular, Verdi did it as well, you get an aria which is slow, and then you get what's something called a cabaletta, the fast bit at the end, and that's to show off what the voice can do.
But where did this love and passion for opera all start?
I went to something called a public library and I got something out called a record. I got out this recording of an opera called Lucia di Lammermoor, which I'd never heard of, by Donizetti with a singer called Joan Sutherland. And it was a Saturday, I remember it really well. My grandmother used to come round for lunch and my mum used to cook. And I got home and I went upstairs and put it on. All I remember, it was like a bolt of lightning. I got to this particular passage, which is known as the mad scene from Lucia, where she actually goes mad. It's one of the great scenes in opera. It requires the most extraordinary vocal technique. And I just flipped. And I remember it. I can remember it like yesterday. And I'm 72 now, and I remember I was 14. And I went, oh my God. And I rushed down the stairs to my father and I said, oh my God, I've just heard this. Oh my God. And that was it. That changed my life.
It is to do with people's early exposure as children to certain kinds of music. I've often read accounts of musicians who say, oh, you know, my parents were always playing this, that, or the other music.
That's Clarke, Emeritus Professor of Music at Oxford University. He's an expert on music psychology, so he can tell us more about childhood musical experiences.
You know, whether it's 50s rock and roll or the Mendelssohn violin concerto or whatever, it just happened to be on in the household on the radio or they were musicians themselves. And that then lays down some very kind of deep-seated interest.
So naturally, I have to ask David about his current feelings on the genre.
The thing about opera is that it's multi-layered. It's about trying to get the drama of a voice in with the drama of a story and the music. It all combines, the story, the music. There's also just what the human voice can do. We sometimes just take that for granted. Well, obviously we speak and we talk, but what the actual human voice can do is extraordinary. I mean, there's some things I've got on, I've heard, but also have on recordings, of course, that you just cannot believe that's actually come out of a human's voice box or with the breathing. And that's an interesting thing about singing as well, that obviously you've got to learn how to breathe. It isn't just opening your mouth and going, It's much more complicated than that. So it's the combination of everything. So melody, voice, drama. Some operas, the great operas, are great operas for a reason. They have great stories. They have great climaxes. They've got great, and of course, within, like in any art form, there are lots of duds as well. But there's quite plenty in opera to keep you going for quite a few years, I think. I haven't found my nadir yet, and I've been going for 50 years. I'm still discovering them.
So how does David feel when he listens to opera?
It makes me happy. It makes me... This is going to sound very heavy in a way, but it makes me glad to be alive. It just enhances my experience as being alive. It takes it with me. The melodies and tunes that I know, you think, how did somebody actually write that? I'm so gone on the quality of the writing and of the tunes and the melody. It transports me into another world, another zone. You forget what's going on out there. It's nothing like it. It's absolutely unique.
People often describe musical experiences as being some of the most sort of strong, profound experiences in their lives. These kinds of experiences when people feel as though they're taken over by music whilst listening to music is one kind of almost altered state of consciousness, you might say. That feeling of being caught up absolutely on the bow wave of the music when it pulls you along into this other world.
There's quite a bit of scholarship on people's responses to music. Dr. Ruth Herbert, a music psychologist and lecturer at City St. George's, tells me about her research into this.
The people that I interviewed, so I've studied experiences of people from 10 to 85. It was really the quality of the experience that they talked about. They talked about either being very immersed or engulfed by music, or this type of visual listening where suddenly the music was in their ears, but what they were seeing, the way they were seeing things, seemed to have altered in some way.
David also used to have quite the flamboyant hobby.
I used to be a drag performer, amateur, but I was for a number of years. I put a dress on for the first time, I think on New Year's Eve or something, just for a bit of fun. And I obviously quite enjoyed it for some obscure reason.
And in classic David fashion, he was miming to opera.
People really liked it. And I didn't do it to educate people about opera, I suppose subliminally I did. But I just loved doing it. And I always loved, taking the mickey out of it. I was known as the Duchess of Hampstead. That was my nickname.
Opera and drag. What a combination. And yet, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Doing drag, and it was very exhibitionist, and I think it brings out, for me, opera brings out the showman. Just about being open, out there, outrageous, and diva-ish. In opera, it does help to be a bit of a diva, and I like being a diva.
So what is it about having a physical music collection that David likes? Why not just stream it like everybody else?
Nowadays, of course, the world is changing because everything is going on to the download and Spotify and all those sort of things, which is what it is and what it is. I have to say, on reflection, I always say it is still amazing how much is still coming out on compact discs, particularly of opera. Most of the major record companies are releasing box sets of complete editions of people's works. I love that, as you can probably imagine. And what's lovely about it is they release all the things with the original artwork. I like to see the original artwork. I like to see recording dates. I like to see where it was recorded. I like to see the history of the thing, not just Miss So-and-so singing that thank you very much, goodbye. And also the other thing about it is I love dipping. I'm known as a dipper. Sometimes when I'm by myself, I go, oh, I fancy a bit of that, or a little bit of that, or ooh, which is lovely. It's like getting it off the shelf and having a look at it and going, oh my God, I remember that, or blah, 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 or blah, blah.
How does buying a new CD for his collection make him feel?
I like to create something, so that was always in me. That this sort of lists and things has always been part of me. I think an element of it is control. I find it very therapeutic.
When you collect music, part of the joy of it for some people is the sense of gradually becoming an expert. These days, people might have music collections or they might make mixtapes for a friend, but it's likely to be more portable. So instead of an old cassette tape, you might have a Spotify playlist that you share with somebody. There's something about that that's not quite the same as a physical collection. But in both cases, what you're doing effectively is really constructing a private space. It's a world of escape that you can inhabit.
Okay, so now we've heard all about David's genre of choice. But what does it mean for the rest of us music lovers?
People have very strong experiences with various kinds of music. And what's interesting is that people who, for instance, have a very strong experience whilst listening to a Beethoven piano concerto may describe that experience in very similar language and with very similar qualities to a person describing having an oceanic experience whilst listening to some music in a dance club versus someone sitting in a concert hall. So, the language and the experience often seem to have many of the same qualities, even if the music and the circumstances are utterly different.
It doesn't matter what genre of music you're into, whether it's thrash metal or jazz or classical or K-pop. We all seem to be moved in the same immersive way. Join me for the rest of this series where we'll dive into other types of music with other passionate superfan collectors and find out what it is about their genre that's so special. If David has ignited your curiosity about opera, you can keep it burning with the starter playlist he created. Just check the show notes for the link. You can find Collector's Notes wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be wonderful if you could leave a review or share it with others. Stay curious and keep listening to new music.